My boss had my friend arrested for picking up children in a minivan, then tried to bribe me to replace her. When I told him I wouldn't take her route, even for double the pay, he laughed and said, "Everyone's got a price. Guess you're just too dumb to name yours." I stayed silent. That was 8 weeks ago. Yesterday, he walked out of the boardroom with no badge, no job, and no one waiting for him. I worked as a bus driver in Central High School. It was in a very low-income area, so seeing kids come out of a one-bedroom apartment that they shared with 3 other siblings, or a home so small it almost looked like a Lego prop was normal. I always tried to brighten the kids' days by handing out packs of trolley sour crawlers on the bus, or Sour Patch Kids every day. Most of them wouldn't even eat it straight away, but instead put it in their pocket and save it for later. It was the only candy they could get their hands on. I had gotten the idea from my coworker Tilly, who had been working there for 30 years. Heck, she was the one who would pay for the damn candy. Then this new guy showed up, a politician with a clipboard, with a golden watch that screamed, "I've never ridden a bus in my life." He stuck out like a sore thumb. Due to budget optimization, we're consolidating routes. Any stop with fewer than 15 students will be eliminated. Students can walk to the nearest active stop. I buried my face in my hands. This conveniently affected all the disadvantaged kids, because they were the ones who lived in rural areas, with the next nearest stop being 4, 5, or even 6 miles away. "Will the rural kids be provided with any alternatives?" Tilly asked, her voice polite and quiet. "No, these cuts are non-negotiable. We're not here to solve every problem. Next question." The room went silent, and me and the other bus drivers communicated through shared glances of worry. The next week was awful. Almost 30 kids were showing up with blisters on their feet, having walked since 5:30 a.m. in the pitch black. 9 kids with 4.0 GPAs were falling asleep in class, unable to keep their eyes open. I watched 10-year-old Marcus stumble off the bus, his little legs shaking from the walk. His grandma worked the night shift at the nursing home and couldn't drive him. Kid lived on Route 47, 6 miles from the nearest approved stop. I myself had no idea what to do, but Tilly didn't have that problem. She pooled together money from all the staff, including me, and rented a minivan for the week. For every day that she wasn't working, she picked up every kid by herself. They were packed in like sardines, and some of them had to sit on each other's laps or even sit on the floor. She tried to drop them off around the corner so the douchebag wouldn't see, but during a random inspection, he caught her red-handed. I saw her face as he called her into the office, sheepish and red. I lingered outside, hearing words through the door that my stomach twist. Liability, termination, final warning. Tilly came out looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, eyes glassy. I expected her to give up, but it was like there was a fire in her that couldn't be put out. Because that weekend, during a staff party she had organized, she told us her plan. "I've been driving these routes for 30 years, she said, standing in her living room while we all sat with paper plates of potluck food. I drove some of these kids' parents. Hell, I drove some of their grandparents." She pulled out a map of the district, red X's marking every eliminated stop. "Monday morning, we park every single bus at the depot. Nobody drives, not one route." The room got quiet. Miguel spoke first. "Tilly, we need these jobs. And these kids need to get to school," she interrupted. "3 parents have called me crying. The walk is making their kids hungry, but the families can't even afford to feed them." One by one, we agreed. All 22 drivers. On Monday at 6:45 a.m., empty buses sat in perfect rows while we stood in front of them, arms linked. The politician showed up at 7:15, his face purple with rage. By 7:30, the calls started flooding in. 3,000 kids with no way to school. Parents started arriving at the depot. Then Marcus's grandma, still in her nursing home scrubs, holding his hand. Tuesday morning, the school board called an emergency meeting. The politician was reassigned to other duties. By Wednesday, not only were all routes restored, but they added 6 new stops too. We were all sitting together in the staff room, raving about our little win, when we heard a knock. It was the police. Tilly was being arrested for her minivan act, on the grounds of unlicensed and dangerous driving, and it was all thanks to Kyle, who I'd noticed had been keeping his distance from our group lately. The arrest happened right there in front of everyone. A week later, I saw Kyle meeting with the politician in a coffee shop downtown. Through the window, I watched the politician slide something across the table. Kyle glanced around nervously before pocketing what looked like cash. The next morning, Kyle was sporting a new watch and avoided eye contact with everyone. Tilly got taken away in handcuffs, but she made bail that afternoon. We all pooled our money together to help her out. Martha emptied her vacation fund. Carlos gave what he'd been saving for his daughter's quinceañera. The next day, things got worse. The politician filed more charges against Tilly. He claimed she endangered children by transporting them without proper commercial licensing. Then he pulled out photos that Kyle had secretly taken. Pictures of kids sitting on the floor of the minivan. Pictures of them squeezed together on laps. The photos were time-stamped and everything. I felt sick looking at them, knowing Kyle had been planning this betrayal while pretending to support us. The school board suspended Tilly while they investigated. Kyle took over her route temporarily. I noticed he started carrying around a little notebook everywhere, one of those black composition books. He was writing down every tiny thing the other drivers did wrong. I saw him take notes when Martha ate a granola bar while driving. He wrote something when Carlos played the radio for the kids. He even documented when Sarah let a kid sit in the front seat because the back was full. His handwriting was small and precise, like he was building a case against each of us. The politician started calling drivers into his office one by one. He'd show them Kyle's reports and make threats. Said we'd all lose our jobs if we kept supporting Tilly. The meetings always happened at the end of our shifts when we were tired and vulnerable. Patrick was the first to crack, then Jason backed down, then Larry. One by one, drivers stopped talking about helping Tilly. By Friday, only 5 of us were still openly supporting her. The politician scheduled Tilly's termination hearing for the following week. Marcus's grandma tried to organize parents to come testify. She got about 30 families to agree, creating a phone tree and everything. Then the politician changed the hearing time to 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Most parents worked then and couldn't make it. It was deliberate, calculated to silence the very people who needed Tilly most. I ran into Tilly at the grocery store that weekend. She looked tired but determined, pushing a cart half full of the candy she still bought for the kids. She told me she'd discovered something interesting. 3 weeks before any of this started, Kyle had applied for a supervisor position that didn't exist yet. She'd found his application in the trash behind the district office. Apparently someone had thrown it out by mistake. The position was for transportation supervisor, with a $20,000 raise. The posting date? 2 days after Kyle started working with us. Monday morning, Tilly showed up at the depot early. She went straight to the security office and asked to see footage from the past month. The security guard, Drew, was an old friend whose kids she'd driven for years and let her look. She found something on the tapes. Video of the politician meeting with Kyle 3 weeks before the route cuts were announced. They'd planned this whole thing, orchestrated every detail. Tilly asked Drew to make her a copy of the footage. The politician must have found out because he showed up an hour later, his face red and sweating despite the cool morning. He threatened to have all the footage destroyed for privacy reasons. But Tilly's daughter Maria worked in IT for the district. She'd been teaching herself data recovery and backup systems for years, always tinkering with computers in her spare time. When Tilly called her that morning, Maria was already at her desk. She'd made backup copies and stored them on her personal drive, plus uploaded them to a cloud server just to be safe. The hearing came faster than we expected. I sat in the back row watching the politician present Kyle's evidence. Every photo, every report, every minor infraction laid out like we were criminals. He had a PowerPoint presentation and everything, complete with dramatic transitions. Parents who managed to attend weren't allowed to speak. The board members just nodded along with whatever the politician said, their faces blank and disinterested. They voted to terminate Tilly, 5 votes to 2. I watched her pack up her office that afternoon. 30 years of memories going into cardboard boxes, thank you cards from kids, photos from field trips, a coffee mug that said "World's Best Bus Driver" that Marcus had given her last Christmas. She was going through old employment records when she stopped. Her face changed, color draining from her cheeks. She'd found something in those yellowed papers, something that made her hands shake as she held it up to the light. She showed me the paper with trembling hands, her weathered fingers gripping the edges like it might blow away in the fluorescent light of the break room. The overhead bulbs flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across her face. It was a termination notice from 15 years ago, the yellowed edges and faded ink telling their own story of time past. Coffee stains dotted one corner, and the paper had been folded and refolded so many times that white creases ran through it like scars. The name on it was Patricia Hendricks, fired for showing up to work intoxicated. The signature at the bottom was Tilly's, written in her characteristic neat script. Patricia Hendricks was the politician's wife. I felt my stomach drop as the pieces clicked together like tumblers in a lock. This wasn't about budget cuts or efficiency. This was personal revenge. 15 years in the making. Tilly kept digging through the files she'd kept in her home office, boxes of documentation she'd never thrown away. She was meticulous about record keeping, a habit from the days before everything went digital. Her living room looked like a paper explosion, with manila folders spread across her coffee table and couch. The smell of old paper filled the air, musty and somehow sad. She'd even pushed her recliner against the wall to make more space for sorting. She found more documents showing Patricia had been given multiple warnings before the termination, incident reports of her stumbling onto buses, the smell of vodka at 7 in the morning, parents complaining about alcohol on her breath when she helped their kindergartners with seatbelts. One report described a near miss when Patricia had swerved to avoid a mailbox, terrifying the 23 elementary students on board. A little girl had thrown up from fear, and 2 boys had started crying. Tilly had protected kids by firing someone who deserved it, and now her good deed was coming back to haunt her. The politician had waited 15 years for his chance at payback, nursing his grudge like a poisonous plant. That evening, Tilly called me while I was making dinner. Her voice sounded different, energized despite everything that had happened. I could hear papers rustling in the background as she talked. She'd done more research and discovered something else. Patricia Hendricks now ran a private bus company called Safe Transit Solutions. The company had been incorporated just 6 months ago, right around when the politician got his position on the school board. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I pulled up their website on my phone, squinting at the small screen while my pasta water boiled over. The sizzle of water hitting the burner made me curse under my breath. It looked professional, but something felt off. The testimonials were generic, full of phrases like excellent service and highly recommend, but lacking any specific details. The photos were stock images I recognized from other sites. Even the company logo looked hastily designed, like something made in 5 minutes on a free website. This company existed for one reason only. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching everyone's mood. The rain wasn't heavy, just persistent, the kind that soaks through everything eventually. I noticed the politician meeting with more drivers in the far corner of the parking lot. He wasn't even being subtle anymore, standing under the one broken security camera we all knew hadn't worked in years. The camera hung at an odd angle, its wires exposed like it was giving up on pretending to function. I saw him hand Elijah an envelope in the parking lot, the white paper stark against Elijah's dark uniform. Elijah had been one of the good ones, always helping new drivers learn the routes. He'd taught me how to handle the tricky turn by the elementary school my first week. Watching him take that envelope felt like watching someone fall off a cliff in slow motion. Patrick got one too, counting the bills inside before stuffing it in his jacket. His hands moved quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the thickness of the stack. They were buying loyalty, creating a network of informants. Every driver who took their money became another set of eyes watching the rest of us. The atmosphere in the break room turned toxic overnight. Nobody trusted anybody anymore. Conversations died when certain people walked in. We started eating lunch in our car cars, windows fogged up from our breath in the cold. Tilly reached out to one of the parents who worked as a paralegal downtown. Her name was Andrea Chen, and her twin boys rode Tilly's old route. They were sweet kids who always said please and thank you, the type who shared their Halloween candy with the driver. I remembered them from last October, dressed as astronauts, carefully dividing their Snickers bars. Andrea started looking into the legal side of things with the determination of a mother bear protecting her cubs. She'd been a paralegal for 15 years, knew every trick in the book. She spent hours at the district office requesting documents, arriving when they opened at 8 a.m. and staying until security asked her to leave at 5 p.m. She brought a thermos of coffee and a bag lunch, prepared for the long haul. Most of her requests got denied or delayed. The secretary claimed forms were misfiled or systems were down. But Andrea kept pushing, using every legal channel she knew. She was like a dog with a bone, refusing to let go. She started keeping a log of every denial, every excuse, building her own paper trail. Her notebook filled up quickly with dates, times, and names. Meanwhile, Kyle was making life hell for the remaining loyal drivers. His new supervisor badge might as well have been a crown for how he wore it. He'd even started wearing a tie, something none of us had ever done. He reported Stephanie for being 2 minutes late, even though she'd radioed ahead about the train blocking Maple Street. That train had been blocking Maple Street every Tuesday and Thursday for 20 years, but suddenly it wasn't a valid excuse. He wrote up Margaret for not doing a complete walk-around inspection, even though her bus was fine, and she'd been driving the same route for 12 years without incident. He even tried to get me in trouble for giving kids candy on Fridays, saying it was a choking hazard and violated district health policies. The same candy I'd been handing out for 8 years without a single problem. His reports were getting more creative and more vindictive by the day. The politician backed every single complaint, adding his own notes about safety concerns and liability issues. One afternoon, Andrea called Tilly with big news. She was breathless with excitement, talking so fast Tilly had to ask her to slow down. I could hear her voice through Tilly's phone, high-pitched with discovery. She'd finally gotten access to some contracts through a public records request that she'd filed through a different channel. She'd remembered an obscure state law that required transparency for any contract involving public funds over a certain amount. The district couldn't block that request without violating state statute. It had taken 3 weeks of daily visits to the state records office, but persistence paid off. Buried in the paperwork was a draft agreement between the school district and Safe Transit Solutions. The contract was already signed by the politician, but not yet approved by the board. If the district's transportation department failed to meet certain metrics, the contract would automatically activate. The metrics were impossibly high: 99.9% on-time performance, 0 complaints, perfect attendance. They'd engineered a crisis to trigger their own solution, like firefighters who set fires to play hero. The contract terms were insane when you read the fine print. Safe Transit would charge the district 30% more than current costs. They'd eliminate even more routes, forcing kids in rural areas to find their own transportation. Some of those kids lived 10 miles from school on dirt roads that didn't even have names. They'd hire drivers at minimum wage with no benefits, no retirement, no health insurance. The safety requirements were minimal, just the state bare minimum. Background checks would be expedited, which probably meant skipped, but the politician would get a consulting fee of $50,000 per year, and his wife would make a fortune. It was corruption wrapped in bureaucracy, designed to look legitimate while robbing taxpayers and abandoning kids. Tilly wanted to take this information public immediately. She was ready to call every news station, post it on social media, shout it from the rooftops. Her face was flushed with righteous anger, reminding me why she'd been such a good advocate for kids all these years. But Andrea warned her to wait. The contract had a clever poison med clause buried on page 47. If the district backed out after signing, they'd owe Safe Transit $1 million cancellation fee. The politician had trapped them in a web of legal obligations. Even if the board discovered the scheme, they might feel forced to go through with it to avoid the penalty. The district's annual budget was tight enough without $1 million hit. We needed a different strategy, something that would expose the corruption without triggering the penalty. That's when Tilly had her wildest idea yet. We were sitting in her kitchen, empty coffee cups and legal documents covering every surface. Her cat, an orange tabby named Chester, kept trying to sit on the papers, like he wanted to help. If enough drivers quit at once, the district would have to privatize immediately. The politician was counting on us being too scared to lose our jobs, too worried about our mortgages and kids' college funds. But what if we called his bluff? What if we forced his hand before he was ready? The timing would be critical. We'd have to coordinate perfectly, like a choreographed dance where one wrong step ruins everything. Too early and he'd have time to recover. Too late and the contract would already be approved. I spent the next 2 days quietly talking to the 5 remaining loyal drivers. Martha was scared but angry, her hands shaking as she told me about her granddaughter who relied on the bus. The girl had special needs and couldn't handle changes in routine. Carlos had 3 kids to feed but couldn't stomach the betrayal. Said it went against everything his father taught him about honor. His dad had driven buses in Mexico City for 30 years. Sarah was young and could find another job. Already had applications out to UPS and FedEx. She showed me the responses on her phone. 2 interviews already scheduled. Hannah had been thinking about retirement anyway. Her knees couldn't take many more years of climbing bus steps. She'd already talked to her financial advisor about pulling the trigger early. Charlotte just hated bullies. Simple as that. She'd been standing up to them since grade school and wasn't about to stop now. One by one, they agreed to Tilly's plan. We'd all submit resignations effective Monday morning. Friday afternoon, we met at Tilly's house to write our resignation letters. Her dining room became our war room. The table that usually held her good china now supported laptops and printers. We kept them simple and professional, using a template Andrea had provided. No accusations, no drama, just polite notices that we were leaving for personal reasons. Tilly made copies of everything on her ancient printer that that wheezed with every page. The sound filled the room like an asthmatic dragon. She wanted a paper trail showing we'd followed proper procedures to the letter. We'd drop them off Sunday night when the office was closed, using the mail slot. Everything had to be perfect. No room for them to claim we'd violated protocol. We even took photos of ourselves putting the letters in the slot, timestamps visible. Saturday morning broke bright and cold. The politician somehow found out about our plan. Maybe Kyle saw us meeting, or maybe someone cracked under pressure. The grapevine in a small district runs fast. He called Tilly directly at 7 a.m., his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. I could hear him through her phone from across the room. His words came out in bursts, like machine firearm fire. He offered her the job back with a 20% raise if she tore up her resignation. When she refused, he threatened to blacklist her from every driving job in the state, said he had connections at every district in a 100-mile radius. His voice got higher with each threat, like a violin string about to snap. She hung up on him mid-sentence. He tried calling the rest of us too, working through some list he must have had. The offers got more desperate as the day went on. Jason got a call promising him Kyle's supervisor position, plus a signing bonus. The politician even mentioned a company car, which was ridiculous since we all drove buses. Martha was offered a $5,000 signing bonus to stay, cash in hand if she showed up Monday. He said he'd bring it personally, in small bills if she preferred. Carlos got promised his pick of routes and a new bus. Not just any bus, one of the fancy ones with air conditioning that actually worked. But we held firm. We'd seen what his promises were worth. We knew that taking his deals meant becoming another Kyle, another betrayer. None of us wanted that on our conscience. We'd rather work at McDonald's than sell our souls. At least fast food was honest work. Sunday night, we dropped off our letters as planned. The parking lot was empty except for the buses lined up like sleeping giants. Their yellow paint looked gray in the darkness, like ghosts of themselves. I felt sick walking away from that building, knowing I might never come back. This job had been my life for 8 years. These kids were like family. I knew their names, their stops, their favorite songs on the radio. I knew who got motion sick on curves and who always forgot their lunch money. But sometimes you have to sacrifice something you love to protect it. Sometimes walking away is the only way to fight back. Monday morning came fast. I woke up at my usual 5 a.m. and had to remind myself I wasn't going to work. My body was so used to the routine that I'd already showered and made coffee before remembering. 6 buses sat empty in the depot, 6 routes with no drivers, hundreds of kids with no way to school. The politician showed up at 6 a.m., earlier than I'd ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie crooked. From my car across the street, I watched him pace back and forth, his free hand gesturing wildly as he barked into his phone. Parents started calling the district, asking where their kids' buses were. The phone system crashed from the volume of calls. The emergency notification system failed to activate because no one had planned for this scenario. Chaos was spreading like ripples in a pond. By 7 a.m., parents were showing up at the depot in person. Some were angry, some were confused, all of them wanted answers. Cars filled the parking lot and spilled onto the street. Someone had to direct traffic to prevent accidents. The politician tried to spin it, claiming we'd abandoned the kids without warning. He stood on the loading dock like he was giving a campaign speech. His voice carried across the crowd, full of false concern and crocodile tears. But Marcus's grandma was there, and she wasn't having it. She told everyone about Tilly's arrest, about the minivan, about the real reason we'd quit. Her voice carried across the crowd. Other parents started sharing their own stories. The mom whose daughter walked 2 miles in the rain. The dad who'd been late to work every day for 2 weeks. The stories poured out like water from a broken dam. The local news showed up around 8 a.m. Not the big stations, just the small community channel that covered school board meetings and high school football. But it was enough. The reporter's van had peeling paint and a crooked antenna, but her camera worked fine. The politician tried to keep them out, claiming it was district property, but parents were already talking to reporters in the parking lot. The story was spreading like wildfire. 6 drivers quitting at once was unprecedented. People wanted to know why. The reporter, a young woman who'd probably covered nothing bigger than a bake sale, suddenly had the story of her career. She interviewed parent after parent, each one adding another piece to the puzzle. The school board called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. This time they couldn't hide it at 2 p.m. on a workday. Too many parents were already involved, already angry. The meeting was set for 6 p.m. to accommodate working families. The boardroom was packed by 5:30. Parents stood along the walls and spilled into the hallway. The fire marshal showed up and almost shut it down. People were sitting on the floor, standing on chairs to see. I'd never seen anything like it. The energy in the room was electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. You could feel the anger and determination mixing in the air. Andrea had prepared a presentation that would have made any lawyer proud. She'd made copies of the safe transit contract for every board member, highlighted and tabbed for easy reference. Different colors for different violations. Yellow for policy breaches, pink for financial irregularities, green for safety concerns. She explained the scheme simply and clearly, using a PowerPoint that broke down the numbers in terms anyone could understand. The politician tried to interrupt, but the board president, an elderly woman who'd served for 20 years, shut him down with a glare that could have frozen hell. Her gavel came down hard enough to make everyone jump. For the first time, they were actually listening. Parents testified about their kids walking miles in the dark. Teachers talked about exhausted students falling asleep in first period. The truth was finally coming out, and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. The politician made one last desperate play. He stood up, straightening his tie, and claimed the contract was necessary. His hands shook slightly as he fumbled with his papers. He said the district couldn't afford to keep running buses. That privatization was the only option. He had charts and graphs showing projected savings, all printed on glossy paper. But Andrea had done her homework. She showed how safe transit would actually cost more while providing worse service. She exposed every lie lie, every manipulation. The numbers didn't add up because they were never meant to. She even had an economics professor from the community college verify her analysis. The professor stood up and explained in simple terms how the math was deliberately misleading. Then came the biggest revelation of the night. The board's lawyer, who'd been frantically reviewing documents during the testimony, discovered the politician had exceeded his authority. His glasses kept sliding down his nose as he read faster and faster. He wasn't authorized to sign contracts over $100,000 without board approval. The safe transit deal was worth millions over its 5-year term. He'd violated district policy and possibly the law. The contract was void. The $1 million penalty didn't apply because the agreement was never valid in the first place. The politician's face went from red to white in seconds. He sank into his chair like a deflating balloon. The board voted unanimously. The politician was terminated effective immediately, stripped of all authority and benefits. They ordered security to escort him from the building. As he walked past, I saw fear in his eyes for the first time. His perfect plan had crumbled. His wife's company was worthless without the guaranteed contract. His career was over. He'd lost everything trying to destroy one good woman who'd simply done her job 15 years ago. The security guard had to take his keys and access badge. Someone in the crowd started a slow clap. It spread through the room like wildfire until everyone was applauding. But we weren't done yet. The board still needed to fix the transportation crisis they'd inherited. They voted to reinstate Tilly with full back pay and a formal apology. They offered jobs to all 6 drivers who'd quit, with a promise to review the wage scale. They even created new positions to hire more drivers and reduce route loads. The very crisis the politician had manufactured became the catalyst for real improvements. Sometimes good things come from bad situations. The board president personally apologized to each of us. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sincere. Kyle's supervisor position vanished like smoke. He was transferred to the maintenance department, washing buses instead of driving them. Third shift, when no one else was around. I heard he tried to apologize to Tilly, but she just walked away. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep. He'd chosen his side, and now he had to live with it. The other drivers who'd taken bribes faced disciplinary action too. Elijah had to return his envelope, unopened. Patrick got suspended without pay. The message was clear. Corruption wouldn't be tolerated. Tuesday morning dawned clear and bright, like the universe was celebrating with us. The sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tilly returned to find her bus decorated with thank you cards, 30 of them, taped carefully to the windows and sides. Some were store-bought, some were handmade with crayons and glitter. One had macaroni glued to it in the shape of a heart. Marcus stood at her stop with a handful of sour crawlers he'd saved. He'd kept them for 2 weeks in a Ziploc bag, waiting for her to come back. His grandma was there too, tears streaming down her face. She hugged Tilly so hard I thought she might never let go. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. The kids cheered when Tilly climbed into the driver's seat. She had to wipe her eyes before she could drive, and she wasn't the only one. I watched from my own bus as she pulled out of the depot, back on her route where she belonged. The morning sun caught the thank you cards in the windows, making them glow like stained glass. It looked like her bus was full of stars. Maybe it was. As I followed her out onto the street, I realized something. We hadn't just saved our jobs. We'd saved something more important. We'd saved the trust between a community and the people who serve it, and that was worth more than any paycheck. The next few weeks were actually pretty normal, which felt weird after all that drama. I was back on my regular route, picking up the same kids at the same stops. The only difference was that parents waved more often, and some even brought me coffee on cold mornings. One mom started leaving a thermos at the stop for me every Tuesday. It was good coffee too, not the cheap stuff from the teacher's lounge. But the politician wasn't done with us. I found that out when Andrea called me on a Saturday afternoon. She sounded worried, talking fast about some new development. Apparently the guy had hired a lawyer and was threatening to sue the district for wrongful termination. He claimed we'd conspired against him, that the whole resignation thing was planned to make him look bad, which was true, but proving conspiracy is harder than just stating it. His lawyer was sending letters to all of us, trying to get depositions. The letters arrived Monday morning, official-looking things with lots of legal language that basically said we might have to testify under oath. Tilly wasn't worried though. She'd kept every document, every photo, every piece of evidence about what really happened. Her dining room still looked like a law office, with filing boxes stacked against the wall. She'd even laminated some of the important stuff, like the photos of kids with blistered feet. Andrea helped her organize everything into a timeline that showed the politician's actions step by step. They had receipts for the candy Tilly bought, the rental agreement for the minivan, even gas receipts showing how many miles she'd driven picking up kids. The paper trail was so complete it looked like she'd been planning for this moment all along. The politician's wife tried a different approach. Patricia showed up at the depot one morning, dressed like she was going to church, pearls and everything. She cornered me by my bus and started talking about how this was all a misunderstanding. She said her husband was just trying to help the district save money, that we'd ruined their lives over nothing. Her voice was shaky, like she might cry any second. She even offered me a job at Safe Transit, said I could be a supervisor making twice what I made now. I told her I was happy where I was, and walked away. She tried the same thing with the other drivers, but nobody took the bait. Then things got weirder. Kyle started finding problems with buses that weren't there before, flat tires that hadn't been flat the night before, sugar in gas tanks, which is an old trick that really does mess up engines, scratches on the paint that looked deliberate. He was working third shift alone, so he was the only one who could have done it, but we couldn't prove anything. The security cameras in the garage had mysteriously stopped working, and the politician's brother-in-law ran the security company. Funny how that worked out. We started checking our buses extra carefully every morning, doing full inspections before driving anywhere. One morning, I found my bus wouldn't start at all. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. The mechanic found water in the fuel line, enough to cause real damage if I'd managed to get it running. That same day, day, Martha's bus had loosened lug nuts on the front wheel. Not loose enough to notice right away, but loose enough to cause problems after a few miles. Sarah found her emergency exit had been sealed shut with industrial glue. These weren't pranks anymore. Someone could have gotten hurt. Kids could have gotten hurt. That changed everything. Tilly organized a meeting at her house that night. We sat around her kitchen table looking at each other, trying to figure out what to do. We couldn't go to the police without proof. The security company was still claiming their cameras were broken. But Megan had an idea. Her nephew worked at an electronics store and could get us some small cameras pretty cheap. The kind people use for home security. Tiny things that run on batteries. We pooled our money and bought 6 of them, one for each bus we drove. We installed them ourselves, hiding them where they couldn't be seen easily. It only took 3 nights to catch Kyle in the act. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to see him pouring something into Tilly's gas tank. He was wearing his maintenance uniform and using his master key to access the buses. We had him dead to rights, but when we showed the footage to the new transportation director, she said we couldn't use it. We'd installed cameras on district property without permission. It was a violation of policy. Kyle could actually sue us for recording him without consent. The whole thing made me want to scream. Andrea found a loophole, though. She always did. While we couldn't use the footage directly, we could use it to establish a pattern. She filed a formal complaint with the district about the vandalism, listing every incident with dates and times. The pattern matched Kyle's work schedule perfectly. The district had to investigate, and once they started looking, they found more evidence. Turned out Kyle had been billing for overtime he hadn't worked, claiming he was fixing problems he'd created himself. The maintenance logs showed repairs for damage that happened during his shifts. He'd been padding his paychecks while sabotaging our buses. The district fired Kyle for time card fraud, which was easier to prove than vandalism. He tried to claim unemployment but got denied because he'd been terminated for cause. I heard he moved in with his sister in another state. Good riddance. The buses stopped having mysterious problems after that. We could finally focus on just doing our jobs without worrying about sabotage. The new maintenance guy, River, was actually competent and honest. They even found some issues Kyle had been ignoring, stuff that could have caused real problems down the road. Meanwhile, the politician's lawsuit was falling apart. His lawyer kept asking for extensions, claiming they needed more time to build their case. But really, they had nothing. The board's lawyer responded with a countersuit for the damage caused by the Invalid Safe Transit contract. Legal fees, staff time, the cost of the crisis he'd created. The numbers added up fast. The politician was looking at personal liability since he'd exceeded his authority. His homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover intentional acts. He was in real financial trouble. Patricia's company folded 2 months later. Without the guaranteed district contract, Safe Transit couldn't attract investors or secure loans. She'd quit her job to run it full-time, so now they had no income. I saw their house listed for sale in the newspaper, priced to move quick. The fancy car disappeared, replaced by an older sedan with rust spots. The politician took a job selling insurance 3 towns over. Someone saw him going door to door with a briefcase, looking tired and defeated. Karma has a way of catching up with people. Spring came early that year, melting the snow by late February. The kids were antsy, ready for summer before spring even started. I was doing my afternoon route when I noticed something different. Parents were gathered at one of the stops, maybe 15 of them. They had a banner that said, "Thank you, bus drivers," and a table full of homemade cookies. It wasn't planned or organized by anyone official, just parents who wanted to show appreciation. They did the same thing at different stops all week, surprising each driver with their own little celebration. The school board approved our raise in April. It wasn't huge, but it was something. They also hired 3 new drivers, which meant shorter routes and more time for safety checks. They even fixed the broken security camera in the garage, plus added new ones with better resolution. The board president made a point of riding each bus route herself, talking to kids and parents about their needs. She was in her 70s but climbed those bus steps like a teenager. She took notes about every pothole, every dangerous intersection, every stop that needed better lighting. Tilly got an award from the State Transportation Association. They gave her a plaque and everything, recognizing 30 years of service. She tried to refuse it, saying she was just doing her job. But Marcus's grandma had nominated her, writing a letter about how Tilly had gone above and beyond. The ceremony was small, just a luncheon at a hotel conference room. But all her kids from over the years showed up. Some were adults now with kids of their own. One guy drove 3 hours just to be there. He told a story about how Tilly had noticed he was being bullied and quietly rearranged the seating chart to protect him. He'd never forgotten that kindness. The politician tried one last desperate move in May. He showed up at a school board meeting during public comment, claiming he'd been unfairly targeted. He had a prepared speech about discrimination and conspiracy, but nobody was listening anymore. Parents just talked among themselves while he rambled. The board president let him finish, then moved on to the next item without comment. He left through the side door, shoulders slumped. That was the last time anyone saw him at a district event. His 15 minutes were up, and everyone knew it. By the time school ended in June, things had settled into a new normal. Better routes, better pay, better management. The kids still got their candy on Fridays, though now it was officially approved as a student appreciation initiative. Tilly still bought it herself, though. Some habits are hard to break. We had a proper break room with working air conditioning and a coffee machine that actually made decent coffee. Small things, but they mattered. They showed the district finally valued us as more than just warm bodies in driver's seats. The last day of school was bittersweet like always. Kids excited for summer, parents relieved but also worried about childcare. I did my final route, watching familiar faces for the last time until fall. Some kids were moving up to middle school, leaving our elementary routes forever. Others were moving away, their families chasing jobs or cheaper rent. Marcus gave me a drawing he'd made, a yellow bus with a stick figure driver that supposedly looked like me. His grandma had written, "Thank you," on the back in careful cursive. I still have that drawing, tucked into my sun visor. We had our end-of-year driver meeting the next next week. Usually these were boring affairs where administrators talked at us about policy changes, but this time was different. The new transportation director had actually been a driver herself years ago. She understood what we dealt with daily. She asked for our input on routes, our concerns about safety, our ideas for improvement. She took notes and asked follow-up questions. When Stephanie mentioned a dangerous blind corner on Route 12, the director promised to have it evaluated. When Carlos suggested staggering pickup times to reduce traffic, she said she'd run the numbers. Tilly announced she was retiring at that meeting, not because she had to, but because she was ready. 31 years was enough. She wanted to travel, maybe volunteer at the library, spend time with her grandkids who lived 2 states away. She'd stayed an extra year just to make sure things were stable, that the new system was working. We threw her a proper party in July, renting the VFW hall and everything. Former students came from all over. The mayor showed up and proclaimed it Tilly Thompson Day. She cried through the whole thing, happy tears for once. I'm still driving the same route, picking up new kids each year. Some are younger siblings of kids I've driven before. They climb on the bus already knowing my name, already expecting their Friday candy. The cycle continues. Sometimes I think about that whole mess with the politician and Kyle. It could have gone differently. We could have kept quiet, kept our heads down, let them destroy something good, but we didn't. We stood up for what was right, even when it cost us. And in the end, that made all the difference. Not just for us, but for every kid who needs a safe ride to school. That's worth more than any paycheck or pension. That's worth everything. The new school year starts next week. I've got my route list, my supply of candy, my thermos of coffee. Same bus, number 47, though it has new tires and working AC now. There's a new driver taking over Tilly's route, a young woman named Campbell who reminds me of Tilly 30 years ago. Eager, caring, ready to make a difference. I told her about the candy tradition and she smiled. Said she'd already bought 5 pounds of Sour Patches. Some traditions are worth keeping, some fights are worth having, and some jobs are more than just jobs. They're a calling, a responsibility, a privilege. I'm proud to be a bus driver. Always have been, always will be.